Welcome to another episode of In Depth with Academia. I'm Richard Price, CEO of Academia.edu, and today I'll be your guide as we explore a fascinating and a little bit controversial chapter in the early days of British archaeology. We're digging, pun intended, into a paper by Roland Keates that looks at the legacy of a man named Thomas Bateman. Was he an antiquarian, an archaeologist, or, well, a grave robber? It's a seriously charged question, and hey, just a quick note from me. I'm presenting this paper with total neutrality, not endorsing the arguments or the conclusions, just putting the scholarship out there for you to decide what you make of it. So, who was Thomas Bateman anyway? At a time when the word archaeology was honestly still kind of a new concept, he was out there with his spade, digging up hundreds of these ancient sites. But here's the core issue the paper tackles. Should Bateman's legacy be celebrated or criticised, or maybe both? Was he bravely unearthing the history of Britain, or was he desecrating ancient graves for personal trophies? This question matters because what Bateman did sits right at the intersection of discovery and destruction. He uncovered objects and skeletons that helped create, like, the very foundation of British prehistory. But he also, by modern standards, destroyed a ton of evidence and honestly treated human remains in a way that feels pretty disrespectful now. The way we judge figures like Bateman shapes how we think about both the origins and the ethics of archaeology. So, this isn't just trivia, it connects right back to what museums display today and the kind of history we even have access to. Let's walk through some key findings and arguments from Keats's paper. First up, you've got to know Bateman wasn't unique for his time. 19th century antiquarianism was all about collecting, not preserving. Bateman and his peers often prioritized getting cool stuff out of the ground fast and didn't worry much about the subtle, stratified layers that modern archaeologists obsess about. If you're imagining someone carefully using a toothbrush to excavate, nope, think more like guys digging big holes with picks and shovels. But here's the twist. Bateman did actually record his finds better than a lot of his contemporaries. He published these detailed catalogues and included a bunch of sketches and drawings, usually by collaborators like Llewellyn Jewett, documenting artifacts like the famous Benty Grange helmet. Those records are still super valuable even when the actual burial mounds are long gone, flattened by agriculture, quarrying, or Bateman's own spade. In fact, if Bateman hadn't catalogued and published, we might have lost a massive part of our knowledge about Britain's prehistoric past. Still, the paper doesn't try to hide the dark side here. Bateman's methods, let's just say, would horrify today's archaeologists. He often dug right into the centre of barrows looking for graves, not caring about what was above or around that layer, and he treated the human remains he found more as curiosities than as things to be respected or studied in terms of, like, people's lived experience. Evidence was lost forever. The very act of uncovering often meant destroying a digression. Actually, if you've ever wandered through those little local museums where you start out with like old coins and Roman brooches, and then bam, suddenly there's a whole glass case dedicated to one eccentric collector's stuff, that's kind of Bateman's vibe. His Lombardale Hall was basically a private museum stuffed with treasures, artifacts, bones, old helmets, which is both very cool and really illustrative of how Victorian amateur science fed into modern institutions. Anyway, back to the main discussion. So how should we see Thomas Bateman today? As Keates argues, it's complicated. If we simply call him a grave robber, well, that's using modern ethics to judge the past and maybe missing the slow, messy evolution of archaeology. But if we just excuse everything he did, that feels, kinda irresponsible, because his approach really did cause lasting harm to Britain's archaeological record. In short, Bateman is a paradox, part destroyer, part preserver, a symbol of both how much we've learned and how much we've lost. For you, listening now, what does all this mean? Well, next time you visit a museum and see an ancient artifact, maybe a stone tool or a Bronze Age pot, it might have a backstory that's messier than you'd expect. Academic research, like this paper by Keates, doesn't offer definitive answers. What it does is give us tools to question, explore, and reflect. That's what I love about this podcast, honestly. It's all about the journey, not the answers. Just remember, I'm keeping it neutral here. I'm not saying Bateman should be praised or condemned, just sharing the perspective from Keats's work. If you're curious to learn more, maybe go and check out the full paper, or even better, read other viewpoints. Academic knowledge is always provisional, always up for re-examination. Thanks for listening to In Depth with Academia. I'm Richard Price, and that's all for today. See you next time for another look at the tangled, fascinating world of scholarly discovery.